I made the 435-kilometer trip from Reykjavik to Karhol in northern Iceland to see the China-Iceland Arctic Science Observatory, known as CHOW. It officially opened in October of 2018, but the partnership between China and Iceland started years earlier.
We had a group of Chinese scientists and sort of high-level scientists, policymakers come to Iceland in the fall of 2011, following a visit of our former president to China. We had actually in 2010, I had the pleasure of working with the foreign minister of Iceland on a document that was delivered to the Chinese on collaboration on science, especially regarding the Arctic. I think my involvement there came because I was working in SEON, the Sustaining Arctic Observation Networks, and I believe that the vision of collaboration somehow had come into my mind more and more. That I took part in something called the Winter Cities a long time ago, and I've always seen the importance, and I think I've believed and understood the importance of collaboration. I hope, at least. And so we asked for cooperation on Arctic issues, and he sent a memo to China on that. And they sent this delegation in 2011, and then the discussion started. Maybe we could build an observatory.
Halldor has been instrumental in the establishment of the observatory and now leads its Science and Outreach Board. He's also the executive director of the Arctic Portal, an organization that provides online climate news and data based in Akureyri in northern Iceland.
It's a balancing act
It's a balancing act.
which can also drive up the climate change if it's not handled correctly.
Of course, that's the challenge, and so that's why I think it's very important. That's sort of been my motto in life, is try to learn from both sides. And when I was lucky enough to go to university in Canada, and my professors, two of my professors were old hippies, and they told me, okay, we're trying to take your blinders away. We're trying to help you to increase your vision so that you can actually learn to understand. And they said, well, if you learn that, you can adapt to anything. So the most important is learn to listen, and then secondly, how to interpret, and then thirdly, how you can actually present it so that others understand. And if we can master that, then of course we will get somewhere. So when it comes to using resources, a lot of the resources are being used without sufficient knowledge. Often it's also a bit clumsy. People don't communicate to the environment around them. They don't communicate to the indigenous people in the way the indigenous people want to be communicated to. It's often a lack of understanding of the different cultures and the different thinking. So it's usually just a mental block. So if we take the blinders away and learn to adapt to each other, then I think we can achieve a lot more.
A lot to be said for old hippies, because I think that concept of removing the blinders, opening up your field of vision, I think with climate change, and I want to get your thoughts on this because talking to you, I get the sense that you'd probably agree with me. I don't see you as Icelandic. In many respects, I don't see myself as an American. I think we're global citizens. And really we have to, if we're going to address climate change, we're going to have to start thinking as global citizens and quit pitting each other against one another, because we all have to work together in order to address this, because it's a huge problem. Is that how you see it, and is that part of the conversation, trying to get people to think differently?
Yeah, I believe so. For me, it's a privilege to live in the North. I live here by choice. I know I could have a much better living if I'd decided to reside in a different part of the world, economically speaking. But from my own pleasure of working and pleasure of being able to hopefully achieve something, then it was never an option, not for me. Is I needed to come back home and try to make something happen. But at the same time, I don't quite fit in my own environment sometimes, because I agree with you. I think we become citizens of the globe. And I am very proud and happy to be working with people all over the place. On day-to-day basis, I communicate with people from basically around the world. And I find that very, it's both revealing and relieving at the same time in a way. It gives you the opportunity to learn about what's going on in different places, and then hopefully you contribute something that at the end makes a difference. Because I totally agree with you, and I think it's the essence of everything. Is like, if we don't do it together, we won't achieve anything worth anything. But then at the same time, how do we motivate people? And that's a tough one. We know, for example, in Akureyri that they're putting an effort into teaching school children and even kindergarten children how to deal with their leftovers, how to recycle and all these things. And this drifts into their family life. And then you just sort of get used to it. And I think that applies basically to the matter if we educate the younger, because the older, it's a lost case in a way. So we have to educate the younger. If we can do that, then I think we can really achieve.
And we know that this COP, COP26, is our last best hope to keep 1.5 in reach. Now, I know that we have an unprecedented negotiations agenda ahead of us, but I believe that this international system can deliver. It must deliver.
In November of 2021, during the COP26 Climate Change Summit in Glasgow, Scotland, a joint declaration was announced between China and the U.S. It took many by surprise. The two superpowers, who are the world's largest emitters of greenhouse gases, announced they would work together on numerous climate-related actions, from cutting carbon dioxide and methane emissions to tackling illegal deforestation.
Nicola Sturgeon, the Scotland First Minister, was just in Iceland, and she said that this is going to be crucial. She says it's easy to exaggerate the importance of events like this, but I don't think it is an exaggeration to say that COP in Glasgow represents the world's best chance, perhaps the world's last chance, to make binding commitments to give us a chance of keeping temperature increases to 1.5 degrees. And that sounds pretty dire. When she says it's world's best chance, but then she says the world's last chance. Those words are pretty impactful. Would you agree with her?
I don't know if it's the last chance, but we're getting to the end of the road in that perspective. We have to react. We know the EU just announced its Arctic communique just last week, where they say that oil and gas and coal should stay in the ground. And the EU has very high expectations in relation to its Green Deal to reduce emissions. They're talking about 55% in 2030. That's very close. It's 9 years from now. So if you're going to try to achieve something like that, then of course you have to slow down. The big question, of course, is, in my opinion, is like, how are we going to slow down and who is going to slow down? Because we know that some of the big powers are not really interested in slowing down because it means less votes to the policymakers, etc. Yes, I agree with her. The alert has to come out, but are we going to listen? Mankind has not been very smart in the past, so we have smart people, but do we have enough smart people? I fear not, but I really hope so. But I mean, just at the Arctic Circle, where she was actually making that announcement or that statement, we had people from the US arguing that the statement by the EU was there just to try to put Alaska out of business. So when you have such conflicts, how are you going to reconcile? And of course, Michael Mann, the Arctic ambassador for the EU, stated that that statement was basically to start the dialogue. I agree with him. We have to start a dialogue, and I think Nicola Sturgeon basically opened up the dialogue, and it means that the COP26 will have to be a very strong dialogue. But we have to follow up, for example, in Davos and at the places where the economy is sort of in the leadership, because I fear that we won't have many economic leaders at the COP26. It will be more the environmental people. But if the economy isn't involved, then nothing happens, of course.
While CHOW is a partnership between China and Iceland, its ryometer field, which listens to polar lights, known as the aurora, is actually maintained by a university in the United Kingdom.
So you've got collaboration of really 3 countries in a sense.
Oh yeah, I mean, we had local contractors build the field. We have local people look after the security, that everything is okay. We, of course, anticipate, because this is one of very few similar areas in the world, that the information from here is going to also benefit, of course, Icelandic scientists, and hopefully stimulate some young want-to-be scientists to become scientists. That's one of the things that we want this observatory to contribute to, is increased interest in these core science.
Halldor believes as more young people choose science and environmental activism as career paths, they have the potential to impact the direction of climate change.
It's so interesting, though, because I think so many people in different parts of the world haven't seen what you've seen with your eyes. And I think conceptually, we hear climate change, but it's like, it's something somewhere else. How do you convince people to start looking at things differently?
Well, that's the tough one. In the Arctic Risk platform, we're trying to do that, is to be able to show to policymakers, to journalists like yourself, media people, and to the general public, the tipping points, which basically means that we may be sailing, and it may be nice to have warm summers, but at some point, it may actually go terribly wrong. In Iceland, we are here because we have the Gulf Stream. The lung is just north of Iceland. If the salinity of the ocean changes to the extent that it would slow down the current, we would have ice age again. And probably, or when you say that to people, they say, wow, that's like 1,000 years from now, it doesn't matter. Of course it matters. And it may actually be much closer than that. It may be like in 100 years. I mean, we're talking about ice-free Arctic Ocean in maybe 50 years or 20 years. It depends on how fast we move, or maybe it's 100 years. Nobody really knows exactly for sure. But we have many scenarios that show that we're getting really close to those tipping points. And we may not live it, but our grandchildren may live it. And I think that's frightening enough that we should definitely step on it and increase our knowledge and increase our information sharing.
Because of the rapid decline in Arctic ice, Iceland is seeing sea levels rise. Global warming is also intensifying the weakening of the Gulf Stream in the North Atlantic. This ocean current is largely responsible for regulating Iceland's climate. Considering the island's dependence on the sea, ocean acidification due to increased carbon monoxide absorbed from the atmosphere is also a major concern for Iceland.
Climate change is going to affect all these areas, and going, for example, to an area like Sakha Republic, to Yakutia, and seeing how the infrastructure has been affected by the permafrost thawing, it is really alarming to see that. And you can also see that the people there, their existence is getting tougher and tougher, because warming means that you have to cool down in the summer, so you need energy to cool yourself down. There's more mosquitoes, etc. And then the extremes in the winter are, even though the winter is shorter, the extremes are even more than ever before. So these extremes are making the livelihood for those people extremely difficult. They need more monitoring to understand the changes. So Yeah, I think the collaboration in the international context is highly important. Also because, of course, comparing information is so important. To seeing what's happening in Alaska, seeing what's happening in other parts. And then, of course, the saying, what happens in the Arctic doesn't stay in the Arctic, that's also, of course, a concern for the lower latitudes, because we've seen ice rain in China, in lower parts of Europe, etc. And of course, big snowstorms in the US that are affecting millions and millions of people in a different way than a few hundred or a few thousand in the Arctic. So the economics of the whole thing are, I think, increasingly being realized. So I think that's also an indication of why the Arctic and the Arctic people are becoming more important than before.
I can't thank you enough. Appreciate it.